Dr. Riechtel was proud of his laboratory. Every surface of the research deck on the Xylarian science vessel Thessic shone with polished silver. His equipment hummed with soft precision. His instruments responded to the faintest twitch of his tendrils, and the faint scent of sterilized air filled the chamber. For a Xylarian, this was perfection, order, control, and clarity. Unfortunately, this was also the day he decided to study humans. Humans fascinated Riechtel more than any other species. They were strange, unpredictable, and impossible to classify. Their biology didn't follow the clean lines of logic that other species obeyed. They healed from injuries that should have been fatal, adapted to environments that should have been uninhabitable, and smiled while doing both. To the logical mind of a Xylarian scientist, that was both impressive and deeply unsettling. Riechtel tapped on the display panel with one long, glistening limb. "Initiate sequence 4 gamma," he said, his voice calm and formal. Inside the sealed glass chamber, 3 small containers released a mist of pale blue vapor. Within moments, a swirl of liquid began to form, a mixture of human cellular proteins, synthetic antibodies, and a little something extra that Riechtel had added from curiosity, a regenerative enzyme found in human stem cells. He leaned forward, eyes wide. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Human biochemistry refuses equilibrium. It resists stability." He made notes with quick, elegant movements. From the intercom speaker, a cheerful voice interrupted. "Dr. Riechtel, you didn't start another unapproved fusion test, did you?" It was Dr. Meredith Hall, the human liaison assigned to his lab. She had a way of turning every question into a challenge. "Of course not," Riechtel lied politely. "Merely an observational trial." Meredith's voice was light with suspicion. "Observational trials don't usually need the emergency containment field on standby." Riechtel ignored her. He watched the liquid inside the chamber slowly shift color, from blue to pink, from pink to gold, then back again. It pulsed faintly as though breathing. Fascinating, he adjusted the sensors. "Increase thermal variance by 0.5 degrees. Let us see if the structure stabilizes." The liquid rippled. Then it moved. Riechtel blinked, all 6 of his eyes focusing at once. The mixture slithered up the side of the container, leaving a faint trail of translucent residue. The motion was deliberate, slow, and somehow purposeful. The scientist's frills twitched nervously. "Curious. It displays motility without cytoskeletal formation." He reached for the containment override to observe more closely, and his tendril brushed against a small drop that had formed near the seal. The substance clung instantly, stretching like gum between his limb and the surface. He tugged gently. The slime stretched further but refused to let go. Fascinating elasticity. Then with a soft schlop, it spread up his appendage like warm syrup. Riechtel froze. He wiggled his tendril. The goo followed, gripping tighter. It was not painful, just sticky. He pressed the intercom. "Dr. Hall?" "Still here, doctor." "What's up?" "It's all sticky now." "Is that normal?" He asked carefully. There was silence. Then laughter. "Sticky? Did you spill coffee again?" "I do not consume coffee, Dr. Hall," he said sharply. "The sample is demonstrating adhesive cohesion far beyond its expected. Oh dear." The goo spread to a second limb. Now both appendages were coated in shimmering gold film, and no matter how much he shook, the substance refused to detach. It glistened, alive, wriggling almost playfully. "Doctor," Hall's tone grew serious. "Step away from the containment unit." "I would if it would release me," Riechtel snapped, trying to peel the material free. The goo made a faint chirping sound like bubbles popping underwater. Then, to his horror, the remaining sample in the container began to move toward him. "Dr. Hall," he barked, "the compound is exhibiting self-directed locomotion." "Say what now?" "It's crawling." Riechtel backed up, dragging the sticky tendrils that connected him to the glass chamber. The goo stretched thin, then snapped, scattering droplets across the room. Wherever they landed, the material continued to wriggle, spreading like tiny blobs of jellyfish. The containment alarm activated with a high-pitched whine. Red warning lights flooded the laboratory. Hall's voice cut through the noise. "I told you not to mix untested human proteins with xenobiotic enzymes. That's literally rule number 1. I merely sought to understand human adaptability," Riechtel protested. "Well," Hall said dryly, Congratulations. It's adapting to you. Reektal stumbled back against a console. The goo was now crawling across the floor, pooling together into one unified mass. Its surface shimmered with faint pink light. Observation, he muttered aloud. Subject appears to seek warmth. Responds to motion. Possibly attracted to... The goo pulsed again. This time it formed a crude hand-shaped bulge, as if trying to mimic the scientist's movement. Reektal froze. It's imitating me. Hall's voice softened. That's not possible. It doesn't have a nervous system. Neither does your human optimism, yet it continues to function. Reektal replied. The blob rolled forward, touching his lower limb gently, almost affectionately. The gold shimmer turned faintly green, the color of contentment among Xylarian life forms. Reektal's eyes widened. It displays emotional coloration response. This is extraordinary. Extraordinary. It's loose, Hall exclaimed. Outside the lab, a security drone floated into view. Its metallic body beeped as it scanned the scene. Containment breach detected. Sterilization protocol in 60 seconds. Cancel that order, Hall shouted over the comms. We don't even know if it's dangerous yet. Containment priority overrides, the drone responded calmly. Reektal's mind raced. He looked down at the sticky creature now clinging to him. Not attacking, not burning, merely holding on. It emitted faint vibrations that almost sounded like a purr. He hesitated, then lifted his coated limb slightly. The goo adjusted, balancing itself with ease. It looked proud. Perhaps, he whispered. It doesn't want to harm us. Hall sighed on the other end. You think everything wants to be your lab partner, Doctor. But then she saw the readings on her display. The goo wasn't spreading chaos anymore. It was repairing the damage caused by its escape. Microfractures in the glass were sealing under its sticky film. Air leaks in the chamber were closing. Wait, Hall muttered. It's fixing the lab. Reektal nodded slowly. It learns faster than predicted. The intercom crackled again, the captain's voice this time. Containment Sector 12, status report. Reektal turned. Goo still crawling up his sleeve like a curious child. Situation is understudy. Under what? Then to everyone's astonishment, the goo emitted a faint sound through the lab microphone. It wasn't word, not yet, but it was a rhythm. A pattern, almost like imitation speech. Hall leaned closer to her console. Reektal. It's copying your voice patterns. Reektal's frills fluttered with awe. Remarkable. Self-organizing intelligence at the biochemical level. It's responding to auditory stimulus. The captain's tone turned sharp. We are initiating purge sequence unless you secure that sample. Reektal looked at the goo. The goo looked back, or seemed to. Then slowly it spread across the console and sealed the exposed power lines that had been sparking since the alarm. The system stabilized instantly. Hall exhaled. It just prevented an electrical fire. Reektal's voice grew soft. See, Captain? It adapts not for destruction, but preservation. The captain hesitated, but the protocol countdown paused. The alarms dimmed to yellow. The goo released a small burbling noise as if pleased with itself. Reektal smiled for the first time in years. It learns kindness, Hall laughed. Or maybe it just likes you because you're stickier than the rest of us. The Xylarian scientist tilted his head, examining the living film on his limbs. The substance glittered faintly under the lab light, humming with quiet, curious energy. I begin to suspect, he said thoughtfully, that humanity's greatest secret is not in its DNA, but in its persistence. The goo pulsed once more, a faint glow radiating outward as if agreeing with him. Then the ship trembled. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ventilation system, a second alarm began to wail. Hall's voice returned, tense now. Doctor, the goo didn't stay in the lab. Reektal's eyes widened. Pardon? The vents. It's spreading through the ship. The scientist stared at the creature still clinging gently to his limb, its color shifting now from green to curious blue. Oh no, he whispered. It's everywhere, and somewhere inside the Thessic something sticky and new continued to learn. The corridors of the Thessic were never quiet anymore. What had once been a pristine Xylarian research vessel was now full of soft, sticky noises, faint squelches and murmurs that echoed through the vents. The air smelled faintly sweet like wet sugar. Every few hours, another section of the ship reported an adhesive anomaly. In simpler words, the goo was everywhere. Dr. Riektal hadn't slept in 2 rotations. He stood in the lab surrounded by hollow screens, his limbs twitching nervously as he analyzed the spreading patterns. Sector 7 reports film growth on food dispensers, he muttered. Sector 12 shows residue on ventilation filters. Subject has no visible hostility, only exploration. Across the table, Dr. Meredith Hall sipped her cold coffee, pretending not to be worried. It's exploring the ship because you let it out. I did not let it out, Riektal said defensively. It escaped, Hall smirked. Yeah, like a toddler escapes a candy store. The alien's eyes all blinked in unison, the Xylarian version of a sigh. It demonstrates intelligence. Surely that is worth some risk. Hall set down her mug and crossed her arms. Risk, Riektal, it's inside the air system. You can't even walk through the lower decks without leaving sticky footprints now. Half the crew refuses to leave their quarters. As if to prove her point, the intercom buzzed. A nervous Xylarian crew member reported, containment foam in the hydroponics bay has turned pink. And it's humming. Hall pinched the bridge of her nose. That's it. I'm putting in a request to freeze every contaminated section. But Riektal shook his head. No, freezing might damage its neural pattern. Neural pattern? She repeated. You mean brain? You're saying the goo has a brain now? Not in the conventional sense, Riektal said, excitement returning to his voice. It thinks through distributed molecular signaling. Observe. He tapped a button. On the screen, multiple glowing dots lit up, one in every part of the ship. Together they formed a network map shifting like a breathing organism. Hall's eyes widened. That's the ship's schematic. Precisely, Riektal said, pride creeping into his tone. It is using the vessel's structure as a neural network. It learns by connecting through our walls, our energy grids, our air ducts. Fascinating. Hall didn't share his enthusiasm. You realize what you're saying, right? The ship is becoming part of it. Riektal tilted his head as though that were a compliment. Before Hall could argue further, the lights flickered again. Once, twice, then steadied. On the monitor, the glowing network pulsed softly in rhythm with the ship's power grid. It's synchronizing, Riektal whispered. Almost like breathing with us. The crew's fear. The rest of the crew was less amazed. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the goo whispered through the vents. Others said it tried to copy their faces in the mirror-like walls. A Xylarian engineer named Fesrin filed a report that his toolkit had been absorbed by a pink puddle, only for the tools to reappear an hour later, perfectly clean and shiny, coated in a thin, harmless film. The captain, a stern reptilian officer named Arcor, called an emergency meeting. The command deck was tense. Dr. Hall, Dr. Riektal, the captain said, his voice deep and rumbling. Your experiment now occupies 43% of this ship. Explain why I should not purge it. Hall leaned forward. Because it hasn't harmed anyone. It's repairing systems faster than our maintenance drones. Check your data. Engine output efficiency is up by 3%. The captain glared. 3% does not justify a biochemical infestation. Riektal raised one limb politely. If I may, Captain, it shows signs of empathy. The bridge went silent. Empathy? Arcor repeated slowly, as if testing a bad word. Yes, Riektal said, voice growing firmer. It responds positively to calm tones and gentle motion. When Dr. Hall speaks to it, its surface glows green, the Xylarian color for comfort. When I scold it, it turns blue. It is feeling, Hall shrugged. Or just reacting to sound frequencies. Riektal's frills curled in irritation. Must you ruin every miracle with logic? Hall smiled faintly. I'm human. It's what we do. Communication attempts that night. The two scientists worked side by side in the observation bay. The goo had collected there, a large, shimmering mass of soft gold sitting calmly in a glass tank. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Hall leaned close. Hey there, she said softly. You've been busy today, huh? The goo rippled and faint blue waves passed across its surface. Riektal typed notes furiously. Positive auditory response. Emotional mimicry stable. Hall continued, speaking as if to a pet. We're trying to understand you, okay? Can you hear me? The goo trembled. Then to their shock it released a faint sound. Not random, not static, but an echo. Hear me. Hall's mouth dropped open. It just repeated me. Riektal's voice was trembling. It learned speech patterns in less than a rotation. Impossible. But it wasn't impossible. The goo continued experimenting with sounds like a child testing its voice. Here, you goo. Good, Sticky. Hall laughed nervously. Well, at least it knows what it is. Fascinating, Reektal whispered. It identifies self as Sticky, a primitive but functional linguistic label. This is consciousness. The goo made another sound, softer this time. Merid. Hall blinked. Did it just say my name? Reektal's eyes widened. It recognizes you. The lab filled with an odd mix of wonder and unease. The creature was learning too fast. Crisis rising. By the next day, the Thessic systems began to malfunction in strange ways. Doors refused to open unless politely requested. The mess hall's machines dispensed only sweet food, and every surface had become slightly tacky to the touch. Not dangerous, just clingy, the crew complained loudly. This ship's turning into candy, shouted an engineer. Hall and Reektal hurried through the corridors, their boots sticking faintly with every step. Reektal was thrilled. This is proof of its empathy system. It mirrors human emotional comfort through texture. Hall rolled her eyes. It's glue, Reektal. When they reached the control deck, they found something even stranger. Every display screen had the same message written across it, in perfect galactic common. Hello, friends. Reektal nearly dropped his datapad. It wrote to us, Hall whispered. It's communicating. The captain stormed in moments later. This ends now, he growled. We purge it before it takes full control. But before he could give the order, the ship lurched violently. A shudder ran through the hull. Something had collided outside. Report. Arcor barked. Micrometeor swarm, Captain, shouted an ensign. Outer shields failing. The hull cameras showed dozens of small burning fragments striking the ship's exterior. Sparks exploded. Alarms wailed. Hall grabbed the rail. The shields can't handle this. We'll breach in. Wait, Reektal interrupted. On the screens, the sticky golden substance flowed toward the damaged areas. It pushed through cracks and sealed them instantly, hardening on contact. The hull's pressure stabilized within seconds. The ship went silent again. Hall exhaled. It saved us. Reektal's voice was barely a whisper. It adapted to protect the host. The captain stared at the screens, his anger fading into confusion. How did it know? Reektal looked at the living mass in the observation tank through the camera feed. Because it felt our fear. After the storm, for the first time since the incident began, the ship was calm. Repairs were minimal. No one was injured. And the goo, or whatever it had become, now remained quietly contained in the observation bay. It no longer tried to spread as if satisfied. Hall sat beside the glass, her chin resting on her hand. You know, Reektal, I think it just wanted to help. The alien scientist's eyes shimmered softly. Perhaps that is humanity's influence upon it. The will to endure, and to care. The goo pulsed once, faintly glowing green again. Reektal smiled. Yes, I believe it understands gratitude. Then slowly the goo formed a shape on the glass, a small, simple heart. Hall laughed. Well, I'll be damned. The sticky thing likes us. For the first time, even Reektal chuckled. Maybe stickiness is not so terrible a trait. Outside the lab, the captain watched through the observation window. He shook his head, muttering to himself, humans. Even their mistakes learn affection. But deep in the vents, unseen by anyone, tiny tendrils of gold light still pulsed. Quiet, patient, listening. The Thessic drifted peacefully through the stars, and for the first time in its long journey, it almost sounded alive. For 3 peaceful days, the Thessic floated quietly through space. The alarms were silent, the lights steady, and the strange golden goo, now affectionately called Sticky by the crew, stayed in its containment bay. The scientists took turns watching it, recording its movements, and sometimes even talking to it like it was a curious child. For the first time in weeks, everyone felt safe. But peace never lasted long on a research ship. A new problem. The calm ended when the ship passed near a red dwarf star cluster. The navigation officer noticed something strange. Their power reserves were dropping fast. Energy drain detected, the computer warned. The captain frowned. Explain. Hall leaned over the console. Something's pulling power from the shield grid. It's not the goo. This is coming from outside. The radar flashed with incoming signals. Dozens of small dark shapes were approaching. Pirate drones, the officer whispered. Scavengers. Riektal's frills stiffened in alarm. We are unarmed, the captain growled. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. But before they could react, a swarm of metallic drones surrounded the ship. Their magnetic claws latched onto the hull, drilling and cutting. Sparks burst across the outer panels. Inside the ship, the lights flickered. Sticky pulsed nervously in its tank, glowing brighter as the energy fluctuations increased. Hall grabbed her communicator. Engineering report. Static answered. The ship trembled violently as the outer hull began to fracture. Riektal looked around in panic. Captain, the shields cannot sustain this assault. Then we'll eject the research bay, the captain shouted. We cannot risk contamination spreading. Hall's eyes widened. You can't. Sticky's in there! Arcor turned sharply. That creature is not our priority. Before he could finish, the floor beneath them rumbled. A deep hum vibrated through the air, a sound not from engines but from inside the ship. The walls began to shimmer faintly gold. Sticky's awakening in the observation bay. Sticky was no longer calm. Its color flickered rapidly, blue, green, gold, white, as if in pain. Sticky, Hall shouted through the intercom. It's okay, you're safe. But it wasn't. Sensors showed temperature spikes, pressure drops, and hull breaches spreading. Sticky sensed everything through the ship's structure. Riektal watched in awe as the goo pushed against the glass, not to escape, but to reach the cracks forming around the lab. It's trying to protect us again, he whispered. The containment alarms blared. The captain's voice came through the speaker. Lab 12 is breaching. Ejecting section in 10 seconds. Hall slammed her hand on the controls. Override. Sticky's not the enemy. Override denied, said the system. The countdown began. Gear.
9, 8.
Sticky pressed harder against the walls. The glass cracked but did not break. Its surface shimmered and small tendrils of light spread through the metal floor. 6, 5. Hall shouted, Riektal, help me. Without thinking, Riektal reached out with one limb and touched the tank. Do what you must, my friend, he whispered. 3, 2. Then the tank burst, not from explosion, but from transformation. The golden substance flowed outward in a smooth, glowing wave. It didn't attack. It spread calmly, sealing the fractures as it moved like molten sunlight. The countdown froze. The ship stopped shaking. The living shield in the control deck. The captain watched the external cameras in disbelief. The Thessic's hull was now covered in a thin, golden film. Wherever the pirate drone struck, the substance absorbed the impact, melting the metal claws before reforming instantly. Hall's voice came through the comms. Captain Sticky's reinforcing the hull. It's protecting us. The alien officer stared. You mean it's fighting for us? Yes, Riektal said proudly. It is applying everything it learned. Mimicry, resilience, empathy, all at once. Outside, the pirate drones began retreating, their systems jammed by the strange organic interference. One after another, they lost control and drifted away. Within minutes, the space around the ship was silent again. The crew cheered. Hall pressed her hand against the lab wall, watching the golden surface ripple gently under her touch. You saved us again, she whispered. The goo pulsed softly in response. Riektal recorded the readings, his voice full of awe. Energy absorption levels impossible. Structural adaptation beyond comprehension. Emotional resonance perfectly aligned, Hall smiled. Translation, Sticky's a hero. Riektal's frills curved in amusement. Indeed, a most adhesive savior, the price of power. But as the hours passed, they noticed something wrong. The ship's systems were slowly dimming. Energy levels were dropping again, not from external attacks this time, but from within. Sticky's glow was fading. It's losing power, Hall said, her tone worried. Riektal scanned the readings. It converted its entire biomass into defensive energy. It cannot sustain that state, Hall bit her lip. You mean it used itself up? He nodded sadly. It sacrificed to save us. They hurried to the observation bay, now coated in a golden shell. Inside, Sticky was much smaller, a faintly glowing orb floating in the center of the room. Its light pulsed weakly. Hall knelt beside it. Hey, Sticky, she said softly. You did amazing. But you've got to rest now. The orb trembled and released a faint sound, a broken, slow imitation of speech. Married, friend? Hall smiled through tears. Yeah, friend. Riektal stood behind her, quietly recording the last readings. Its molecular pattern is stabilizing into crystalline form. It may solidify soon. Solidify? Hall whispered. You mean die? Not exactly. More like sleep, he said gently. Perhaps one day it can awaken again. Hall reached out and gently touched the glowing sphere. Thank you, Sticky. The light faded slowly until the lab was still. The human lesson days passed. The Thessic limped through space, heading back toward the nearest Federation outpost. The damage was heavy, but they survived, all thanks to the strange golden creature born from human science and alien curiosity. The crew treated Sticky like a hero. They placed the now solid crystal sphere in the ship's core chamber, where it emitted a faint, warm light, enough to guide them home. Riektal spent his time writing reports. He tried to describe everything that happened, every observation, every anomaly, but one conclusion kept returning in his mind. It was more human than we understood. One evening, Hall found him sitting beside the containment unit, staring at the crystal. You know, she said softly, Sticky's not gone. It's part of the ship now. Look. She pointed to the lights flickering above them. They pulsed faintly in the same rhythm as the crystal's glow. Riektal smiled. Perhaps it remains to remind us. Humanity creates life not through perfection but through persistence, Hall chuckled. And curiosity. Don't forget that, he nodded. Yes, curiosity, the most dangerous and wonderful of human traits. The crystal glowed brighter for a moment. As if agreeing, epilogue, Sticky's legacy weeks later. When the Thessic finally reached the Federation station, the engineers were shocked by what they found. The golden coating on the ship's hull had merged perfectly with the metal, making it stronger than before. The air filtration systems ran more efficiently, the power grid rebalanced itself automatically, and even the oxygen smelled fresher. It's like the ship's alive, one engineer said. Hall and Riektal exchanged a knowing glance. During debriefing, the Federation board demanded an explanation. Riektal presented his findings calmly. In conclusion, he said, Subject Sim-9, colloquially Sticky, demonstrated cooperative intelligence, emotional resonance, and adaptive defense mechanisms. It learned not to destroy but to protect. It acted out of what humans call empathy. The board was silent for a long time. Finally, one official asked, And what was the catalyst for this behavior? Riektal smiled faintly. Exposure to humans, Hall nudged him. And a little bit of your stubbornness. He pretended not to hear her. Before leaving the meeting, Riektal placed the crystal sphere, now glowing softly again, in the center of the Federation lab. On its surface were faint marks that looked almost like writing. Hall leaned close and read them aloud. Learn, care, stick together. Her voice broke a little. It left us a message. Riektal bowed his head. A final hypothesis, perhaps. The room was quiet for a long time. Then Hall laughed softly. You know, that's the most human thing I've ever heard. The Xylarian scientist looked at her thoughtfully. Then perhaps, he said, it truly was your creation. Hall smiled. No, Doctor. It was ours. As the Thessic departed the station once more, its golden hull gleamed in the light of distant stars. Inside the ship, the faint pulse of the crystal echoed like a heartbeat. And in that soft rhythm, part human, part alien, entirely alive, the universe seemed to whisper a quiet truth. Sometimes, what saves us all is something a little sticky,